Hi guys, I'm Ali Hussein Kasim of Ali Talks Tech. I have with me another interesting guest today, my good friend, Catherine Muraga. I always confuse the Muraga with Murage. So can we be clear it's Muraga?
Yes, it's Muraga.
It's Muraga.
Yes.
Catherine, karibu sana.
Asante.
Catherine and I go maybe close to 10 years?
Close to 10 years.
Close
yes.
to 10 years in the tech industry. Catherine today is Managing Director, Africa Development Center at Microsoft. Catherine, you are smack in the middle of these talent conversations across Africa around software engineering. But I'll come to that in a bit. For now, as I always like to do, is to just quickly give a bit of a synopsis why Ali Talks Tech and why we are having this conversation today. This is really about telling our Pan-African story from a tech perspective. For too often, for too long, others have been telling the story for us. So this is me doing my small part in telling our story. And as again, we always start is, who is Catherine? Catherine, Managing Director, Africa Development Center. Let's talk about your role first at Microsoft. And then as we evolve and move on to this conversation, we'll touch on the various components of your professional career. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ali, for having me. I'm glad we could sync our calendars to have this session. I know you've asked me two questions in one. So let me first start off with, who is Catherine? Catherine, born and bred in this great city of Nairobi, specifically in Eastlands.
As we like to say, Kanai.
Yes, Kanai, I love, yes. In fact, I have a t-shirt saying, me, I love Nairobi.
Okay.
Sheng is my first language. For those who don't know what Sheng is a street language, a mixture of English and Swahili.
Now, if you tell me Sheng is your first language, maybe you can tell us. I know we're talking tech and stuff, but it's good to also get to know you a little bit. If you can, how did Sheng come about? How did it evolve to become the language that most young people in this town today talk like it's their first language?
I think I would imagine it's because when you look at Nairobi, and I believe it's similar to major local cities across the world,
Yes.
it's coming together of people from very different parts of a country or even countries. So when I reflect on how I grew up with folks from the eastern part of the country, coastal part, western. And when you look at that street language, that's why it's a mixture of English, Swahili. And some local dialect, like words that are commonly used in major dialects. So they're infused into the language and create meaning. And like any street language, it keeps evolving. So there are some words I would hear today and I have no idea what it means. Yeah. But the eldest in a family of 5. So I often say I was born into leadership, took many leadership type of roles as I was growing up.
Firstborn, tough
Firstborn, yes, firstborn. In high school, I loved physics. We had a great teacher, Mr. Karanja. I just love the way he used to break down those, because physics is hard, can be hard, but he used to make it look so doable and easy. So upon completion of high school, my dad nudged me, hey, consider this, studying computers. I was like, okay. But I must also say, ever since I was young,
your dad pushed you towards computers?
Correct.
That's interesting.
Correct. And I think he knew that I always had a curious mind. And he knew about my love for physics. And also, I believe at the time, computers or computing was just starting. There was that wave. Currently we're in a wave for AI.
Yes.
And I'm glad he did. So I joined African Nazarene University and I took a computer science degree, did so much mathematics. when I look back. And I think that for me, my turning point was during my penultimate year. Did an internship at Atlantic.
Lantic. Oh, I've not heard that name for quite a bit.
It was a great company founded by Kenyans.
Yes.
It was a Microsoft partner, I think gold or platinum, and their core work was system integration. So essentially...
and networking.
And networking.
Early days. I remember in my younger days working at Toyota. That's, should I say, mid-90s. Atlantic did actually our first local area network and wide area network across Eastern Africa.
Wow. So the thing that tugged at my heart is Lantec exposed me to structured cabling. How do you move enterprises? Back then, you used to buy servers in boxes.
Correct.
So unbox the server. I know this was before cloud and virtualization. Desktops, laptops, connect users, set up users on Active Directory, mailboxes. How do you make sure that the desktops communicate with servers? How do you make sure Ali is accessing what he's supposed to access and at the right time? So that just blew my mind.
So you're talking about your experience starting out at infrastructure level, at the basic level.
Backend.
Wow.
Backend. So by the time I completed my internship, they were gracious enough to tell me, hey, once you're done with your degree, give us a call. And I did just that. And for me, I'm eternally grateful because I never looked for a job early. Completed my studies, went back to Lantec, and now that just continued to open my world because, like you said, for example, in this case, they deployed at Toyota. We deployed to different enterprises. So it gave me a flavor of, okay, what does IT mean to publishing, manufacturing? And then from there, I joined an internet service provider. It used to be called ISP Kenya.
ISP?
Yes.
ISP Kenya.
I recently reconnected with Brian Longwe. He used to be my boss's boss.
What?
Yes.
That is amazing. Brian is now in Malawi.
And that introduced me to the world of wide area networking, routing. And then after a 2.5-year gig, I then now joined corporate Kenya.
Okay.
Different roles, still in technology.
Okay.
And of course, with a bias with back-end infrastructure. Okay. So did a 6-year gig at East Africa Breweries. Amazing time.
What were you doing at EBL?
5 different roles, actually. Within tech, server administration. So you get to see, I got to see what is the application of technology in beer manufacturing.
Are those roles there anymore anyway?
They are there, but they've changed. So I did...
They have evolved.
They've evolved as technology has evolved and as rightfully.
So what did the server administrator do?
Server administrator did very similar to what today an Azure admin would do, like basic hygiene. What are the key things you need to continually do for a server to make sure services are always up? Patching, maintenance, backup.
The boring stuff that makes companies tick.
Correct.
Literally the unsung heroes at the back end.
Correct. The people you hardly see unless an incident occurs.
Things become elephant somewhere.
Absolutely. So also a bit of database administration in Microsoft SQL. And after 6 years, joined the Pride of Africa and Kenya Airways. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Kenya Airways introduced me to, at the time, Kenya Airways had around 5,000 staff. So it introduced me to...
Across the world.
Yes. Licensing. How do you structure licensing for an enterprise? For Windows environment?
Optimally.
Exactly. Optimally and in a sustainable way. Of course, engaging a lot with finance, procurement. And then I dipped my toe into the world of financial services after that.
So from Kenya Airways, you got into financial services.
Correct. 8
banks
years.
Banks or startups.
Banks.
8 years.
8 years.
In banking.
Exactly. And that's how our paths crossed, if you recall.
Yes.
I first joined Stanbic Bank. handled a portfolio where I was in charge of IT operations. IT operations is, again, the people who make sure services are running from
100%.
at the back end. I left. I felt ready to take on a C-suite role. And that's when I joined KREP Bank at the time, but it later rebranded
Sidian
to
Bank.
Sidian Bank. 4 amazing years.
As CIO.
At CIO/COO.
Chief Information Officer, Chief Operating Officer.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And one of
4 years?
4 years. 4
Tell us
amazing
about that.
years. It was amazing because it thrusts me into
Beyond tech.
Beyond tech. How do you tell the story of tech to businessmen? And why is it important? Because these are the businessmen, the owners of the bank. You want them to approve your budget, your spend. So you have to break it down in terms
and these guys are about making money, not spending.
Correct. They're okay to spend if they can see what's in it for the bank. So that was a very interesting.
That's a very interesting one, Catherine. One thing that in my experience, I have found sitting as an operational executive and sitting at board level, that tech people find it very difficult to translate tech needs into business requirements. And at a board level, the board members want to approve stuff that has, one, a direct impact to the bottom line, short, mid to long term. 2, has an impact on the ability of the company to sustain long term business continuity. This is not something that's easy for tech people to talk about. Tell us your experience about that.
One of the things, I had to go back to school early.
Wow.
I had to go back to school. And the beauty about the era we are living in, you can go back to school, but you're still
working.
Exactly. When you look at, I'll use an analogy. For those who opt to take an MBA, there's a common course called accounting. They're fully aware, not
accounting for non-finance people.
Or accounting 101.
Yes.
Let me call it accounting 101. They're fully aware that the cohort, not everybody wants to go into accounting.
Yeah.
But they make sure it's mandatory. Why?
Yes.
Because accounting teaches you numbers. Numbers is the language for business.
100%.
So you have to learn. So I took up a course to learn, okay, when I'm making a presentation to the board about a huge IT spend, and IT spend tends to be big, depending on the size of the organization.
Usually.
What is in the mind of a businessman? How do I make sure I'm speaking their language? How am I able to show what is it? Yes, it's a cost, but how is it connected to customer value? How is it connected to culture value? How is it connected to business value? So that's what I did to improve my fluency. So I'm not just coming there to talk about, we need to virtualize this environment. You need to migrate to cloud.
It gets shut down.
Correct. You lose the audience.
Yes.
So you have to learn. Remember, communication happens at the person you're communicating to.
Correct.
Not you who's talking.
Correct.
So I had to go back to school early to answer your question. So those 4 years were quite transformational.
So you did your MBA?
I didn't do an MBA. So I did various courses to improve my fluency in terms of business speak. And augment it with, already I was a techie, had the certificate, had the knowledge and experience, but I needed to improve my fluency in terms of business. And that was now Sidian Bank, courtesy of those 4 years.
Yes.
I was able to learn and put it to practice.
Nice.
And after that, Stanbic called me back.
Stanbic called you back.
Correct.
Wow.
And this time round as the CIO, Chief Information Officer, and later on as Head Engineering. And the thing that was really exciting at Stanbic Bank, Pan-African Bank, different type of customer, tier 1. So larger transaction, bigger book, and also the engage.
More demanding customers.
Exactly. Very demanding customers. And it was also equally exciting. But I'm glad by the time now I was stepping up to this higher level, see, I had 4 years to practice in terms of business fluency. So I also equally enjoyed it. The one thing that happened, I changed jobs during COVID, April 2020.
That's the definition of a VUCA movement.
Correct. And it was a lot of learning also as a leader. How do you bond with your team virtually?
Yeah, because you were not meeting anybody.
Absolutely.
Probably for more than a year.
Absolutely. And also remember, and it's key for leadership because I equated to a transplant, an organ transplant. The body can either accept or reject. So each leader, I believe, had to learn how to, especially those who are new like me, how do you endear yourself to this new team so that you gel?
So, Catherine, how did you do it? I mean, you joined during a period where guys accepted the fact that we are going to be working virtually. We don't know for how long. How long from the time you joined as the new CIO at Stanbic to the time you met your first team? How long? How many months?
No, it was not months. Oh, before we met physically?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I think must have been like 6.
6 months.
Yeah, so it was quite something. But one of the best things that came out during COVID are the things we used to read about. That, for example, a bank, can you run end of day from home?
Don't get me started.
I know.
End of day.
I know. It's a favorite topic for you. How do you... I mean, we burst network bandwidth because now the perimeter changed.
It's amazing how...
From a cybersecurity perspective or
branches
networking.
were closed.
Correct.
Guys were still transacting.
Correct.
So all of a sudden, this thing that most banks used to call alternative channel became the channel.
The channel, the main channel.
And still is today.
Correct.
From I always like to say BC, before COVID.
Oh, I see. Nice one.
Before COVID. And now after COVID, connectivity, virtual digital finance has become second to none. Yeah. How did you make that transition? Virtually.
I know.
No people sitting in the server rooms looking at whether servers are working. I remember those days when you are not an IT guy if your office is not next to the server room.
Yes, and
those days are gone.
You need to make sure you have a line of sight.
Yes.
Yeah. I think when disaster strikes, there's a saying that fortune favors the prepared.
100%.
Yeah. So organizations that really thrived are those that were prepared or were agile. And in this case, some part of the bank were prepared. For example, we were still, because courtesy of being Pan-Afric, there was an aspect of...
You were already doing some virtual.
Correct.
Yeah.
So now it was more of bursting in terms of licenses, bursting in terms of network capacity. And then also from a cybersecurity perspective...
That's the other conversation.
Correct. Just appreciating that now we used to fortify the perimeter around the office, but now the office has changed.
Now it's virtual.
Exactly. It's not, I'm working, but I'm in coastal part of Kenya. How do you make sure that the gadgets that I'm connecting with are trusted? I'm accessing the right things.
It's actually amazing how we have evolved. A friend of mine, Moses Kemibara, I'm sure you know Moses, coined this term, COVID-assisted digital transformation. And I think we don't appreciate the fact that COVID has been the single most change agent of our lives in this generation.
Yeah, that is true. But also companies or entities that are agile. And agility is you quickly make the decisions, have the muscle to experiment, because you can make a decision and then go into it. You're like, this is not working, but it's still okay. We are still going to proceed, but quickly course correct.
Course correct.
Yes.
The ability for us human beings to unlearn things is, I think, the most important thing today.
Mm.
In your career, in your experience, how has Catherine
Mhm.
and her teams and the organizations you've worked with looked at failure? Is it a learning or is it a failure? And when is it a failure? When is it a learning?
Mm.
You know, this ability to unlearn some things that are deeply ingrained in us
Mm.
is probably one of the most important things that leaders need to think about.
Absolutely. I think let me first answer your
Yes.
earlier question in
Yes.
terms of now to what I do, and I'll then
Yes.
come back to that. So I finished my stint at Stanbic, then I joined Microsoft. And Microsoft, I broadly wear two hats. So I lead an amazing team here in Nairobi, largely software engineering. We develop some of the amazing products used by customers globally. And I'm also an engineering director. What that means is I also have a product that I'm in charge of. Yes, with customers and revenue.
Interesting.
Yes, so used across the globe again and with revenue lines. And then in addition to that, we've been very big on what we call the ecosystem. So the ecosystem to us is how do we continually grow the digital skilling in this country and continent? So we chose to start with Kenya, but our focus now going forward will also be Africa.
Yes.
How do we continually, because we can't say, the other day I had someone talk about many years we've been saying Africa is rising, Africa is rising. It's time for Africa now to rise. We are rising. But when will we say Africa has risen from a digital perspective?
That's a very interesting question for me, which is something that I also talk a lot about. I like to challenge all of us. I was about to say leaders, and I realized we are all leaders here today.
Yes.
I like to challenge all of us to think about the youth dividend in Africa. The median age in Africa is 19 years.
Yes.
And think about the youth dividend, not from a perspective that there is the dividend here now. No, we have to work for it.
Absolutely.
Right now, we don't have the dividend. Right now, what we have is the youth bulge, which is a huge potential asset. What we do with it,
correct,
is what will result in the dividend.
Correct. Spot on, Ali. And that's why we came in and said, for those who are interested in digital, for those who are itching, what is this digital thing? We have a huge repository of learning material.
Okay.
We started with universities, visited 10 universities.
I've been following what you're doing.
Yes.
Super amazing.
Thank you. And in universities, we do broadly 3 things. Engage faculty, train them. Because Ali, iron sharpens iron. You're only as sharp as what sharpens you.
Kabisa.
And tech keeps changing. So train faculty, engage students, and show them this is a possible career path in the world of technology. And the path is broad. So it's up to you in terms of what tickles your fancy. And then thirdly, for those universities that allow, we partner in terms of reviewing curricula. Again, why? Technology keeps changing.
Let me ask you, how do you navigate this curriculum conversation? We have structures across, not just in Kenya, across Africa and the world. Governments the world over seem to think that curriculum is their only preserve. In Kenya, we have the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, KICD. And I sit on the board of one of the publishing houses. And my challenge to our teams is usually think beyond KICD. I know it may seem like I'm a rabble rouser, which I am, but that's okay. That's another story for another
Yes,
day.
you are.
But sitting at board level, I want to challenge everyone to think beyond. artificial intelligence, for example, is not in our curriculum. So does that mean that our young people are not going to learn AI because it's not a KICD approved subject? I mean, surely. How are we creating talent that is fit for purpose?
Absolutely.
Talent that is ready to work for big tech, talent that is ready to get in and start their own businesses. I think that's the challenge of our generation, of our leadership today. I keep on hearing lots of conversations about talent wars. I'm like, what talent wars? We are not even on the battlefield while people are fighting for this talent. So what wars are we talking about? It's a walkover.
I think let me touch on you've
Yes,
touched on
please.
a couple of things,
Yes.
and I've not forgotten your earlier question
No
on
worries,
failure
no
and
worries.
experimentation.
Yes.
We've been very privileged to find open-minded individuals in these institutions.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, in terms of just hearing us out and saying, okay, you do have a point here. We are fully respectful that institutions have their own rhythm of business. There's a schedule as to how often the curriculum is reviewed. We're okay with that. So I think that the trick for us has been to find open-minded individuals in these institutions. And I want to jump on that challenge you've just thrown
Yes.
there. And it's not only leaders, Ali. Each one of us knows somebody. And at times it's very easy to sit and say, oh, I want to see this change. My challenge to each one of us is, why don't we influence that change? Yes, that change we want to see. So we want to see the youth equipped. What do you have such that you can influence and have it directed correctly? Microsoft ADC, we focused on STEM-related courses. We still need doctors in
STEM.
this. Yes,
So,
just STEM.
So let's
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Although now I hear there is another one at the end of it.
Yes.
Called
There's
arts.
some
STEM.
STEM. Yes.
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics.
Yes. So we've chosen to go the STEM route. I know other institutions that are now starting because they're in the healthcare.
Yes.
Let's look. How do we equip medical facilities? How do we equip institutions of higher learning that are focusing on training doctors or medical personnel? So my challenge is to each one of us, what do you have?
Yes.
Your networks, what do you have where you have?
How do you influence?
Exactly.
How do you be part of the change?
How do we change that narrative? Let me go back to your question on, is it failure or a lesson? I think it comes back to culture.
100%.
There are organizations that failure is will earn you a ticket to leave the organization if you make a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happened.
It happens.
Let's be honest. Yeah.
It happens. It happens up to today, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And I always say that nobody goes to work and say, today they'll see what sort of a bad person I am. Those people exist, but they are 0 point, right? And also, well-established organizations have a way of weeding them out. And oftentimes when you find people making mistakes, somebody had a line of thought. It's just that at some point it didn't work as planned. Or let me go a bit technical. You worked on a product, a package, you want to deploy it to production. It worked very well in tests, right? You even got the approval. But for some reason, taking it to production, something failed, causes outages to customers. The approach should be, let's sit down with the engineer and find out what happened. What happened? What were you pushing? And thankfully, there are logs, review the logs, as opposed to, show cause why disciplinary action should not be taken against you.
And that is so unfortunate because it happens almost as a given.
And which is unfortunate because we rob organizations the opportunity to learn. Because if a failure, for example, was caused by a single point of failure, it can then trigger conversations around. So which other place do we have a single point of failure? Let us prioritize that.
Would you agree then that it's only a failure if we don't learn from it?
Absolutely. It's also a failure if we repeat it.
If we repeat it.
Yes.
You know, when I look back at my life to date, and I think about the failures that I have gone through as a individual personally and as a professional, in retrospect, those failures were learnings. And I've repeated some of them. For sure, I've repeated some of them. But I wish sometimes you had a crystal ball backwards to think about how we have evolved as individuals and as human beings, and to look at your role today, you know, from literally, you know, your hands dirty fixing cables and stuff, to today leading one of the top organizations in this part of the world with close to 500 software engineers. I didn't know about your engineering component, which is, for me, super interesting. What would be your advice to local entrepreneurs and business people who are keen to build the next big tech? I keep on saying this every day. We can build our own big tech companies in this part of the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a line in our national anthem. Plenty be found within our borders.
Correct.
And I will tie it back to what I said earlier in terms of what do we have? Because it's always good to, when you want to do something, start off with what do you have? What do you know? This question of talent and tying back to the possibilities of building these big entities.
Yes.
First of all, one of the things we have right now is we have students that are coming out of universities every year, right? And also colleges.
Maybe 2-3 times a year, because we have how many? Last time I checked, we had like 47 universities in this country today.
Correct. So I'm just
yes,
rounding it off and saying annually. Annually. Then also go to colleges,
tertiary.
TVET. Exactly. Talent. It's raw talent.
Yes.
So my point is, we'll have to take a long-term game, because let's also be honest. That is our strength. We have many young folks graduating from institutions of higher learning. As you go up in terms of senior engineers, for example, of people who've amassed years of experience, it starts to thin. So we need to take a long-term play and start working with these fresh minds, right? And I'll also throw in a component of mentoring and coaching.
Correct.
Let's coach these individuals. That's the thing about, remember your days when you're fresh from campus. You're eager to learn.
Yes.
You want to make an impact. And that's the thing even with Gen Zs today. It's the same thing I've seen even working with universities. These guys just want to be shown, this is the way. Put in the hours. These are the certifications. This is what it takes to pass. This is a connection to a job. This is a connection to impact. Because a lot of people, many people draw fulfillment to knowing, how am I impacting life? Right. Just show them. So we have to put in time early. We have to put in time. And put in time to what we have in plenty as a country. This youth we are talking about.
People, youth bulge.
Yes.
Youth bulge.
And work with them. Some will leave the organization. It is well.
It is well.
Let people prosper.
Not everybody will, is cut out to work in A, B, and C company.
So that's how I look at it. And even if they leave, the few years or months they've been with you, they added value. So bring somebody else to build on it. Yes.
I wish we had more time. But my producers is already telling me and I have to listen to them. There is one burning question I want to ask. In your experience now, working with top-notch companies at a Pan-African level and now at a global level, what does it take to be a top big tech software engineer? What is the difference between a top software engineer working at the top-notch, top levels of the global economy and the local software engineer?
I think I'll expand it even beyond software
Please,
engineering.
please.
Just working in big tech, and you've chosen to take tech.
Yes.
Number one, mastery is a process, not a state. Adopt a continuous learning mindset. Ali,
mastery is a process.
It's not a
I
state.
love that.
You cannot say, I am good. I've mastered Active
No,
Directory.
You've not mastered anything.
You've not mastered, because tech keeps changing. So we must adopt a learning mindset. In Microsoft, we call it growth mindset. We are always learning. Number two, software engineering or a tech role. Appreciate scale.
I think this is one area that we have not really understood, not mastered, because mastering, again, as you said, is a process.
Correct.
Appreciate scale.
And I'll break it down.
Break it down, please.
In this market, and with all due respect, perhaps the largest, a company with the highest customer base is probably Safaricom.
Yes.
With
16 million customers.
Correct. And that is scale. Now, when you take it a bit higher, we're talking hundreds of millions.
That's scale in a small pond. Let's really just put it as it is.
Correct. What does it take to design or architecture products or capabilities that are used at that scale?
In a billion people.
Yes. Like, for example, every day, 1 billion identities. People, what do you do when you power on your machine? Control-Alt-Delete. Verification. How do you...
1 billion people are doing the same thing at the same time.
Possibly. So how do you architecture for such scale?
For scale.
Yes. How do you design? How do you support? And it's going back to things that we were taught in school, distributed systems. But now push it a bit further. The scale here, as we are used to, is scale at less than 20 million mobile apps or mobile capability. Now scale from a platform perspective. And now you start thinking about, what does that mean?
Then on demand.
On demand and always on. Always on. And then lastly, or thirdly, I would say, what does it take to do business with different countries or geolocations?
And cultures.
Cultures, especially cultures. And we're not saying you change who you are.
No.
But are you aware how you
appreciate the others?
Correct. And also aware of how you're being encountered. Yes.
How people perceive you.
How people perceive you. So I would say mastery is a process, not a state. Appreciate scale and appreciate business across borders. Even as we are training the youth, we must also change their mindset. Some will work in Kenya.
Some will work in China. Some will work in the US.
Correct.
Look, we are coming to the end of this interesting conversation, but it will be remiss of me if I do not ask you one last question. My personal experience with artificial intelligence at my level of working every day, I'll say this. Things that used to take me 2-3 days to do are now taking me 2 to 3 hours because I'm using AI and machine learning in my work. What's your experience at scale? Where do you see this going? How are you operating at this level?
I think let me give you different facets.
Please.
Number one, at an individual level, because we are living in a digital world.
Yes.
My earlier example of why MBA students, for example, take on Accounting 101. so as to learn the language of business.
Yes.
Because we are living in a digital world, it is key that we invest just to obtain fluency in artificial intelligence. What is AI?
Yes.
We're not trying to convert people to become AI engineers. No. Just basic fluency at a personal level.
Yes.
Then also take it to an enterprise. You're a board member.
Yes.
Management.
Yes.
It is key for organizations to invest. Also 100%. For their staff to obtain that fluency. And with regards to the sector that they are in. Now, extrapolating it in terms of the amazing things, for example, Microsoft is doing.
Yes.
And other companies on AI. This thing is impacting lives. From even just showing, forecasting. If we continue at this trend, we are destroying our environment. If we continue at this trend, what do we need to do to improve food yield of crop in the fields?
Yes.
How do we reduce pollution? How do we aid learning, for example, for students who struggle with mathematics? How do we infuse AI such that if Catherine is struggling with a particular concept in calculus, how do we enable her to learn at her rate? So this thing can be applied in so many ways. How do we improve lifespan in terms of medicine?
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
So that's why I'm a huge advocate for, let's obtain fluency. Let's also bring it down to what sort of sector are you in? Appreciate what can it do? What are the risks? What are the ethical considerations? And then also let's also engage, for those who can, let's engage fellow industry folk, regulators, government,
policymakers.
And remember, we're at ground zero. We are all learning.
We are at ground zero.
And it's a beautiful thing.
This is the thing that I do not think we all really appreciate. We are at ground zero. We are at the time when the internet was founded. Oh, Catherine, I wish we could talk more.
I know.
But thank you so much. For me, my take home today is mastery is a process. Catherine, asante sana.
Thank you.
Listeners, viewers, asanteni sana for listening. We come to an end of this super interesting episode of Ali Talks Tech. Catherine, thank you.
Thank you.